It is showtime. Welcome to Comic Book Radio. This is Hosting the Hosts, episode 11, and I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. Tonight, my guest is John from John's Longbox. So before we have him on the show, I just want to give a quick shout out to Alternaween. Go check that out. We're at 1,520 right now with 45 backers on board, and we've got about 9 days left until this ends. 9 days left. When we get to 2,000, we'll then donate 200 comic books to kids in children's hospitals so they can have something fun for Halloween. Every $1,000 we raise on that, we donate 100 all-ages comics to comic books for kids. So thank you guys for making that possible. The whole point of Alternaween is to get comics out there for trick-or-treats, for Halloween. You guys hand them out, all that good stuff. Again, thank you guys, making it a fun event. Creative Faye, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. We got John's Longbox in the chat and on the panel tonight. Yang, what's up, Yang? Hope you're doing good. We got Ara in the chat as well. What's up, Ara? Said, I'll be definitely signing up for your legend level all-stars. Thank you very much, Ara. Appreciate that. You get a whole bunch of stuff with that. I was calculating it before on the Alternate Comics site. You get like $175 worth of physical items on the Legend tier, which is a $300 tier. If you use the code ALLSTAR, you get $50 off, so it goes to $250, and then you get more than enough in terms of discounts, perks, and incentives over the course of that year as well. The membership pays for itself very quickly. Logan, how you doing there, Logan? Thank you for being here tonight. We got Bill Glasby as well. What's up, Billy? Jetto Jaga in the house, along with... that was it for now. Okay, good. We got a lot of people saying hey to everybody. Oh, hey, happy birthday, man. Happy birthday. There you go. Everybody wish him a happy birthday right there. Yan Zhao with his birthday today. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a very happy birthday. Alrighty. So before we begin, before we let him on, let's have John Candy take it over with a wonderful little intro.
And now Wink Wilkinson's Weird World with your host, Wink Wilkinson. Hi, everybody, it's Weird Wink Wilkinson laughing and scratching at you. How's everybody doing today? I got a little bit of a stiff neck. Let me just fix this up. Oh, you got me! Oh, I feel so very weird.
How you doing tonight, John?
I love John Candy. That was like the first and really the only celebrity that just... I was miserable that day when he died.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up
one of the greatest.
I was an SCTV freak, you know. I would suffer through Saturday Night Live just to watch SCTV. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I used to, you know, back when I was a kid, it was Love Boat, Fantasy Island... Then it was a SCTV, SCTV first, then Saturday Night Live, and then the Kenny Everett video show, and then Don Kirshner's rock concert. I'd be
man,
trying to stay awake watching. Yeah,
jeez, that sounds
all with comic books in front of me, reading comic books and watching all these things on Saturday. Why go out and talk to people? I had comic books. And
that sounds amazing. Man, that sounds like sometimes that'll be like what I'm watching on Pluto TV. You know Pluto TV?
Yeah, old stuff. It's great.
Oh, it's wonderful. I love it.
You can't see my whole basement, but in front of me there's a gigantic TV with my gaming table and then recliners. My wife is usually down here watching Hallmark. You know, it is like Pleasant Valley Sunday every day down here in the basement. Why go out into the world? You know, right over here, I'm cataloging my comics. She's watching Hallmark.
Yeah, a little piece of heaven, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't want to leave. I told my wife I'm going to die in this chair, and then I'm going to haunt the next people who buy this house.
I believe you. Man, oh man, John. So the reason that you're on the show, hosting the hosts, for those that don't know, aside from the tongue twister of a title, it has to do with the fact that it's basically people I've been on their show. I enjoy it. My time there was a lot of fun. And these are people who generally help promote others and have them on their shows. So I'm interviewing the interviewers. And I loved being on John's show. I'm hoping to be back again in
Oh,
the near
anytime
future.
you
That'd be
want.
fun. All right,
Anytime
we'll have
you
to
want.
pencil it in soon. Stay after the show. I'll talk to you. We'll get
Yeah,
a day.
you got it.
We'll
You
get a
got
day
it.
down. And yeah, John's doing a great job building up his channel. If you guys aren't subscribed yet, the link is in the description of this
Thank
show.
you.
And go subscribe. It's a wonderful place and a lot of great guests. And John is just so, as you can see, so very enthusiastic. A lot of fun. It's always a good time. So John, I'm really happy to have you here tonight, man.
Glad to be
And
here. Glad you asked me.
yeah, I can't wait to just have a whole big comic talk with you.
Yeah,
I
let's
want to
have
discuss
a
the
talk.
past, present, and future.
When you're on my show, I usually I learn the hard way to keep it an hour because I wake up at 3 a.m. for work, and then I start to crash. So I like, okay, I'm keeping it an hour, and then keep it on a high note. So I sometimes feel like I rush people off, but I can feel my
Oh,
body.
no. I hear you, man. I hear you. Yeah, we'll keep it an hour. We'll keep it an hour.
Oh, this is Saturday. I'll stay up all night.
Oh, okay.
I
We'll
mean,
keep it
that's not-
4 or
that's
5 hours.
I was about to say this is Saturday night. I don't have to work tomorrow, so
Well, we keep the show relatively 1 hour, but if we go a little bit over and we're having a great conversation, then we can do a little bit more. That's fine.
Logan's been on my show too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, he's great.
Logan's
John is
great.
great. Logan's great. All righty. Yeah, and Ara loves the channel too. There you go. Derails
thank
has
you,
already
Ara.
subbed, recommended as well. There you
Thank
go.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. So, John, you obviously have a lot of love for comics.
Yeah.
Where did that stem from? When did that happen?
The story I always tell was I went to a public school up until 2nd grade, and then I transferred to a Catholic school, and I was the new kid, and I didn't know anybody, and I couldn't read. Yeah, it's still awake past 10. Yeah, RJ does a live chats on Wednesdays at he's live talking about his comic at 9 o'clock, and I'm always the first person to comment. Sorry, RJ, I can't stay awake. I go to bed at 9. But anyway, as I was saying, I went to public. When I was in 3rd grade, I couldn't read, so I was very smart. I did everything that they asked. Socially, I was, social butterfly, but I just couldn't read, and I looked at it like this, like, Pete, I don't know about you, but when you went home in 3rd grade, did you do math problems? No.
Oh, yeah, I
So
did.
when I went home, I didn't read. Reading was something that you did at school. You know what I mean? Like, you picked up a book, Mary goes to whatever. So and then I made friends with Carl and Sean, and they were into comic books. And I'm looking at the comic books, and I'm like, I've seen them. Of course, everybody saw comic books. This is 1976. Of course, everybody saw comic books back then. And I'm like, oh yeah, comic books. So I would look at the pictures, and then we would talk about them. We would draw, but I wasn't reading them. I couldn't read them. And then next thing you know, they're talking, and I felt stupid. So next thing I'm practicing, and then I realized I enjoyed reading. It wasn't something that the nun told me to do. It wasn't just open up this stupid book and, see Mary walk down the street. It was exciting. Nightcrawler's throwing a punch, and Cyclops is shooting a laser beam, and Superman swooping down. And we were talking about them. We were drawing. We were literally making our own comics. That's funny. I still have them. I should showcase the comic books we made in 3rd grade.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
You know what I mean? And then by the end of the story I tell is in 3rd grade, I sat next to Jordan, and Jordan was the kid who couldn't pull his pants up. We had our own bathroom in the classroom. 3rd grade. And the door would open, Jordan would come out, exposed to the world, flap into the breeze, pull my pants up, wipe my hiney, and then he would sit down next to me. And I'm like, I'm not smart. I got a problem. Like, I got to learn to read. And then by the end of the year,
You're like, there's someone that's got it worse than me.
Yeah,
there
by
you go.
The end of the year in 3rd grade, I was in the top group. The teacher. The teacher called the top group the Owls. And I always joke because I can't remember. The bottom group, we were the cuckoo birds, So here I am sitting next to Jordan. Jordan's got snot down his face, and I'm like, oh man, I got to get out of this. So I learned to read. And then in 5th grade, I was reading these big. I got obsessed with King Arthur. I was reading these big honking, Thomas Mallory, the Lamorte Arthur, and I was scribbling away notes on index cards and sticking the index notes in my. And then I got called down to the school guidance department, and she had my notes. They must have fell out of my pocket, and I'm being interviewed for like 3 hours. So then I'm like, am I in trouble for reading? Like, so I really got scared. Like, I was going to stop reading. And she's like, no, keep reading. So I was like, all right, yeah, but I'm in your office for two fucking hours. So I never know what.
Hey. You got the one F-bomb. You did
Oh,
the one F-bomb, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I try not to curse. If you notice, I never curse. So I apologize.
I didn't think I needed to give you the warning. I'm definitely gonna have to give Razor Fist a warning tomorrow.
Man,
But you get the
I'm
one.
very
You get the
embarrassed.
one.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Not excited.
You're
But
allowed
anyway,
one.
I answered your question in way more detail than you need.
Man, oh man, talk about an origin story, man.
Yeah. And then I became a
Goodness.
villain, and I wiped out all humanity. Oh, Belmont Press is here. Justin, he's been on my.
Who'd you gravitate the most to? What character? What book?
Of course, I love Superman. I love everything about Superman. You know, I love that he's a good guy.
That's a great era of Superman,
that he's
too.
strong. I don't even care that he's unbeatable. I just like the fact that he was the ultimate good guy. Like, he intrinsically knew what was good, and he intrinsically did the good. And when Superman showed up, you were like, your house was on fire. And Superman shows up, and you're like, as the building is collapsing, you're like, I'm safe. Superman's here. Which is why I can't stand the Man of Steel movie, because if you make a movie where you're afraid of Superman, you misunderstand Superman at a fundamental level. So there you go. Zack Snyder fans attack.
Yeah, I got a lot of problems with the Man of Steel movie and that take, and I think Henry Cavill's a good choice too.
Yes,
I think he's got
I
it in
love
him.
Henry
I think
Cavill.
innately he's more Superman-ish in interviews than he portrays.
And the more I learned about him, the more I realized
It's not
what a
his
great
fault.
choice that he was squandered. Thank you, Belmont. Says I'm a great dude. Thank you. I tried.
Totally.
But
But back then though, were you first exposed to Superman through the comic, or did you see the film? Did you see any advertisements or anything like that?
Before the Superman movie, I actually remember getting excited that the Superman movie was coming out. Like,
Okay.
Superman, I don't know. Superman was just around, kind of like oxygen. It was just, you don't remember the first time you took a breath. Like, what?
Yeah.
Superman, like, even before I could read,
Because obviously they had the George Reeves and things like that, and Super Friends and the cartoon and everything else too.
My dad.
But yeah, those are some really. That's a good time period of Superman, the late 70s.
Yeah,
I like a lot of those
everybody
comics.
loves Superman. You know, people who didn't like people who didn't like comic books, like adults, teachers, stuff like, they would have Superman. They just love Superman, even if they didn't like comic books. You know, like, you know, it was up there with like Mickey Mouse. It was a character that everybody loved. Everybody, back then Disney characters had a more affection towards them than they do today. If you ask me.
What a different time.
What a different world, you know. And then Star Wars came out, and forget about it. Oh man,
right?
You know, I was in third grade when Star Wars came out. I was like, this movie was made for me. You know, I ran around playing lightsabers for the next couple of years, and now
there you go.
Now I don't care about Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's crazy. It really is. Thinking about these things, I never would have thought that I felt basically the same way about them too. And it's kind of compartmentalized for me, at least. Like, I love what I love. Nothing that has come out that I don't enjoy has ruined the past of it for me. I know for some people it has, but I know for most it hasn't. But yeah, it's interesting with the way that kind of thing has transpired. But so with comics, you're growing up, you're really enjoying them, you're getting into them, they're helping you to learn how to read, everything else. Now, as you're getting older, and I'm guessing you're starting to collect comics as well. You know, you're probably working as a teenager or whatever it may be. Were you still into comics at that point? I know a lot of people, you turn to a teenager, you discover music, girls, all kinds of other things, and then comics usually take a sidestep.
From the first comic, comic books were always in my house. I had two older brothers, two older sisters. My older sisters were into Archie's, and my two older brothers, just, as they were kids, they would just, whatever comic books would get handed to me. So I had Superman, Flash, and stuff like that. But I gravitated towards Marvel, and the first comic book that I remember buying was Fantastic Four 186, with the Fantastic Four fighting the Claw and the Molecule Man, and then Reed Richards becomes the Molecule Man in the sea. And I had to buy another copy because it was just beaten up, it just destroyed. And ever since then, I still have every comic book I've ever bought, with the exception of one missing Longbox that had Spidey Super Stories. Who would steal Spidey Super Stories? So that's the one series that's just missed, and Marvel Team Up. So I guess I had a Spider-Man box that disappeared. Now that you made me think about it. But other than that, I have every comic book I've ever bought. The only comic books I ever sold was I was so super poor. I had Mad 2, 3, and 4, and I sold them. And my heart hurts every time I think about that. that I sold those comics. That's how broke I was. And even the brokest I was still getting a couple of titles, to the point where I made the conscious decision in 2015 to cold turkey, no more Marvel and DCs, and I actually panicked. I was like, what am I going to do? You know, like to me, it was almost like I cut off a limb. You know, my whole life, since 1977, I'll say, till 2015, go to the comic book store, go to the comic book, or back then it was go to the spinner racks, go to the comic book store. You know, whatever I did, like I would buy Top Ramen when I was in college and eat Top Ramen as long as I can have comic books. You know, I was that obsessed, you know, and then all of a sudden, no more Marvel. I was like, what do I do? I felt like a smoker having withdrawal symptoms, or like a person in an accident having phantom limb pains. Like, but that's how I don't want to get negative on your show, but that's just how bad I was upset with Marvel and DC at the time. So, and then
I hear you.
And then I shortly found your company. I'm trying to remember the exact year. I think it was 2017. I went into a comic book store, and it's gonna drive me nuts. I should have done my research. It was a 3-issue series with was it Mother Russia?
Oh yeah, we put that out. Yeah, in 2017.
Mother Russia. I found Mother Russia and I picked it up. I was like, this is $1.50. You know, and I was like, is this old? You know, and how did I miss this? And no, the guy's like, no, this is brand new. This is $1.50. So I didn't know who you were. I didn't know who your company was. I just saw that it was on newsprint, you know, and I was like, $1.50. So I looked, and at this point, the first 2 issues came out. The third issue didn't come out. I was like, yeah, even if it stinks, I'm gonna, you know, $3 is still cheaper than and I loved it, you know. And that was the day I said, I don't care if this guy puts out blank comics, I'm buying them. It's on newsprint and it's $1.50. You know, why can't the other guys do this? So.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I appreciate how much you love Altern, and you've been such a big supporter over the years too. I want to back up a little bit, though.
Oh, sure,
I want to back up a little bit. Let's get into the 80s a bit in terms of comics. What were the 80s like for you in terms of this? Because a lot of stuff happened in comics in the 80s.
The 80s were awesome. The 80s were awesome, and I don't want to be like one of these. Back in my day, get off my lawn, kid. But the
go
80s
for it.
Awesome.
I don't mind. I do it all the time, and I'm not even that far up, and not saying that you are.
You know,
I'm not even that. I feel like I am, though. Goodness, but yeah, go for it.
They would, you know, Marvel was at the height of its power. If you ask me, it was, you know, Jim Shooter was still in the high seat. Directed Marvel, turned them from a bunch of hippies into like a creative force. You know, and whenever anybody argues with me, I go, look at all the Marvel movies. All the successful Marvel movies are from the Jim Shooter era. You know, there's nothing new that's coming out that's any good. DC started, like, I wasn't a DC fan. I always thought that, like, I loved the Golden Age. The Golden Age had problems, but I loved it. But Silver Age DC to me was goofy. You know, like, Batman wakes up one day, my costume was stolen. Let's go to Pluto and find it. You know, those kind of comics never really interested me. But Crisis on Infinite Earths, it brought me into DC. So I got to say, like, from Marvel, I was a hardcore collector from 1976 till 2015. But DC, Crisis on Infinite Earths was, and then 2000, like the New 52 was my jump off point. And if I had enough money, I got everything by Marvel. I got everything by DC. You know, as much as I could. And then the Independents came out. You know, what was that? I forget what year Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out. Was that 83?
84.
It was 84?
Yeah.
And I remember I picked it up, and I was such a serious hardcore comic book collector. I had this in my hand, and I'm going, they're making fun of comic books. This is making fun of the X-Men. How dare they? Like, I was outraged that this guy, these no-name jerks were making fun of my beloved comics, and I put it down and I never bought it. I'm still
oh mad. Man,
I'm still mad. Till this day, I've never read a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because I know I effed up. and I'm still,
You're punishing yourself.
yeah, I'm still mad. And everybody is telling me that they're great, you know, and they got to be great because people love them. So that was on me. But that was how, you know, and at the time I was into punk rock, you know, and I was buying all the punk rock and straight edge stuff, you know, and like they were like so serious, you know, and I was like, and then a couple of goofy punk bands came out, and I'm like, they're making fun of punk rock, and then I realized if you take things too seriously, it kind of becomes like a cult.
Well, yeah, there's a respect factor, you know, and at first it's hard to make it out. So I get your instant reaction, you know, because you don't really know. But then when something's been out for long enough and you see, oh, there's a respect to it. It's not just like ripping off. It's not just making fun. You know, it's like they're doing this because there's a respect. It's not, but it's hard to tell sometime at first. So, you know, you get a pass, man. You know, it's understandable.
Yeah, I know now I was wrong. Like, and that just shows you what like a zealot mindset will get you. You know what I mean? I messed up on not only something that would have been a financial windfall, but a good comic as well. You know, because of how they're making fun of Frank Miller. They're making fun of Frank Miller's Daredevil run, one of the greatest Daredevil runs of all time. You know, how dare they? You know, and now now I'm looking at this $180,000 comic book that was in my hand.
man, do you know if it was a first printing too?
Yes, it was the day it came out. I remember who owned the comic book store was he. I remember at one point he had a bunch of them and they were there. Like, he was good. I maybe my memory's tricking me, but I remember at one point he had Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like all next to each other with a sign that said "must read." You know, and I'm like, I'm not reading that. That's stupid turtles. Those, you know, superheroes are serious. They're not even human. You know? Whatever excuse to justify making it.
That's great. I'm sorry, though. I'm sorry for your loss.
My own fault. It's one of my biggest comic book missteps.
So you know, getting into the later part of the 80s, how did you feel about like McFarlane, Jim Lee, Silvestri, all those guys?
I know I'm going to catch hell for this, but that was like new and weird to me. Like I liked McFarlane. Silvestri to me was like, I don't know, like it was too like new school, and like I'm like I didn't particularly like it. I guess I'm an old fogey, but like John Buscema was comics to me. Like if you said comic book to me, John Buscema just popped into my mind, and I didn't even like Jack Kirby at this point. And I'm a Jack Kirby freak now because Jack Kirby, like I missed the Jack Kirby. By the time I started collecting comics, he was over at DC, and then when he came back, it was like Devil Dinosaur and Machine Man, which I don't think was his best work. So that was old school comics. John Buscema was comics, and then forget about it. John Byrne and George Perez, that was like the triumvirate of comic books. And then later on, I started like, okay, Jack Kirby, yeah, I got to give him credit. And now I'm like, Jack Kirby, I try to get every comic book that this guy drew. You know, I think he's the best. But Mark Silvestri and Todd McFarlane and all of those Image guys, I didn't really like them. And I bought all the Image comics that came out, but I'm a story guy. Like I since I did my channel, I've been trying to do more analytical thought about comic books, and I realized good art will buy me the issue, but good story will keep me to buying the next issue. And a lot of those Image comics, that was the perfect name for that comic, for that company rather. They didn't really have the stories to hold me on, you know, and they came out so infrequently, and then there were just splash pages. And even recently, I started picking up some Image comics to fill in holes, and I'm like, you know, this is still 30 years later, and I still can't figure out what's going on. Like, I challenge you to read like the first 5 issues of Supreme and tell me exactly what the plot was, you know?
I hear you.
But then
I guess I'll catch hell for it too, because I like the concept. I like a lot of the different art. I like things like that. But a lot of Image when it came down, early Image when it came down to the execution, most of it, I was just like, what is happening?
Right.
You know, and it just, I wasn't there for it. I didn't find that there was a lot of an emotional punch of anything. Thematically, it's all over the place. You know, character motivations, I don't even know if many or if all of them even were there. It was really difficult. A lot of the stuff I dug it. It looked cool.
Right.
They knew how to make things look cool, but they really needed some solid help. Which obviously, I mean, I'd be curious if they would argue against that, because it seems like they, at looking back now, acknowledge that they did. They obviously did need to get people in there to help them out with writing, and they did eventually do that. But yeah, at first it just was like, yeah, it looks cool, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I grew up loving the stuff they did though with Marvel, and I loved all the other guys too, like Buscema, Romita, just Byrne. I mean, I look at most of my collection, and most of my collection revolves around those guys.
Yeah.
But I did really love a lot of that stuff, and even as a kid, getting into comics for the first time. Like seeing the Hulk, the first Hulk I saw was McFarlane's. The first X-Men I saw was Silvestri's. But the first Spider-Man I saw was Romita, so that was a bit different for me. And it was funny because the first time I saw it was on a record. It was the first Spider-Man that I saw was on a Peter Pan record back when Spider-Man was on the Electric Company, which was wild. And that was my first seeing the art, and it was John Romita art, and that was my Spider-Man.
If I close my eyes, John Romita's drawing Spider-Man. If I'm not looking at directly somebody else drawing Spider-Man, it's still Romita.
Absolutely, yeah. And so yeah, it's interesting, and seriously, I don't think you're not going to catch hell from me. However you feel about what you like or what you don't like is absolutely fine by me. But yeah, it's I get it. So now moving into the 90s, how did you start feeling about comics at that point in time? Because again, a lot of different things happened throughout the 90s with comics as well.
In the 90s, I remember getting into in the 90s. I'm trying to think how old I was. I think I was in my 20s, and all my friends started going to college and moving away. And I had a business. I was part owner of a pizzeria, so I was just working, and that was going to be my job. But I just remember being like, "This is it. This is my life now. I'm the pizza guy." I'll still. So I guess it was like an early midlife crisis or early life crisis, and I was reading the Doom Patrol with Grant Morrison, and at the end of every issue of the Doom Patrol, he would start putting like, these are books that inspired this issue, and I was just like working. I was like working like 18-hour days. It was rough, and when you own your own business, you know how rough it is. I don't have to explain to you. So I would read these books, because I would, somewhere next to a pizzeria in New York, you just come home drained, So I'm reading On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and I'm like, I got to do something. And then my pizzeria went under. I didn't realize that the main guy, his wife she was coming every day taking the money, and I thought she was putting it in the bank, but she was putting it up her nose. You know what I mean? So I'm not even joking. The mafia came in and took everything out of the pizzeria, and I was like, I'm kind of glad. And I packed up and I went across the country, and I went to college. So I started college when I was 25. And at this point, I'm super broke. I'm super pretentious. I was into anything Vertigo. So I was in on Sandman and Doom Patrol and Animal Man. I was reading Jack Kerouac. I was hanging out in coffee shops, like snapping my fingers, listening to jazz for the first time. So my comic book kind of got hoity-toity and pretentious, So, but I still love my Fantastic Four. My Avengers, my Thor. I got those comics.
90s were a bit rough for Fantastic Four, though.
Well, Todd DeFalco took over, and I gotta say, as much as I love Spider-Girl comics, that's like a throwback to Bronze Age Marvel. I don't know, like he got caught up in all the variant covers and the in the crossover events, and I think like he was like ground zero of like the end of Marvel, if you ask me. Like,
oh wow, really?
It wasn't politically correct or woke or anything. It was just event, gimmick, event. And then under him, he was handed Jim Shooter's greatness, and then under him, we had like the speculator crash in Chapter 13 for Marvel, and and it's funny. I was at a comic convention, and I literally bumped into him, and I was like, he says, Tom, I'm like, what am I going to be, a jerk? I was like, thanks a lot for Spider-Girl, and he's like, oh, okay, I'll autograph one for you. I was like, okay, cool, thank you. no need to be a jerk.
Yeah, there was a lot of things though going down at that point in time that led to Marvel doing that, and a lot of missteps and a lot of things where they were kind of doing the right thing at the very wrong time, and then a lot of other things were doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so nothing seemed to work out too great for them at that point in time, other than some of the side stuff. And then even then, they found a way to not make that work. It just seemed like who owned them at the time, if I remember correctly, really wanted to sell them off. And they didn't want any of the aspects of what Shooter had built up as well, even some of the Epic creator-owned line and things like that. I mean, if they had stuck with Epic, I don't think the Image guys would have left. I don't think Image gets formed. I think they stay.
Epic was great. Epic was one of the best things about Marvel at the time. Yeah, they were really good.
So it's strange that just that one move seemed like the house of cards just started to fall, and corporate greed really started to set in. And so the 90s were a bit of an awkward time for comics. Yeah. And yeah. I hate the whole idea of, especially now looking back at it, how much it was billed as the fault of the customer, the fault of the collector bubble burst, right? People are ignoring the aspects of the gimmicks from the publishers and things like that really stemmed and drove the industry pretty into the ground.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but you're right. It wasn't our fault. You know what I mean? I still bought one copy of Fantastic Four every month.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the stuff was fun. Some of it was great. I'm not going to say I didn't love some of the hologram covers or a glow-in-the-dark cover or something like that, but it started to become all about the gimmicks, and less about the story. And nowadays, it looks like nothing compared to some of the gimmicks and whatnot that's happening in comics. But I think that's why largely a lot of the lessons weren't really learned, is because the lesson was about the collectors didn't show up to buy all the crap we put out, and that's not the lesson. The lesson was we put out too much crap, and we put that ahead of telling good stories.
I look back at, I do a comic book video. For those of you who don't know who I am, I do a comic book every day if I'm not doing a live chat. So, and I'll talk about, and one of the things you'll see, like the subscription from Marvel, and I'm like, look at this. There's like only 18 comic books coming out on Marvel, and every one of these is dynamite. Like this is Chris Claremont, John Byrne doing the X-Men, or Marv Wolfman writing the Avengers, or whatever. These were classic comics. Marvel didn't really flood the shelves until maybe the 90s, and it wasn't special. You put your best guys, your best women on Frank Miller doing Daredevil. That was awesome. And then they were doing like Thunderstrike. Who cared? What was the other character? Blood Wolf or something like that. They were just throwing everything out. It wasn't.
Are you thinking of in Thor with Blood Axe? Was that it?
No, it wasn't. Didn't they have a Blood Hawk or something? Or am I thinking Nighthawk? Or not Nighthawk? The guy with the diamonds and he flew. Marvel was just putting out anything at this point.
Oh man, I can't even remember.
Yeah. Then Jim Shooter. As much as I love Jim Shooter, he did do the New Universe, which was garbage.
That was pretty bad.
I think his ego probably got a little too carried away. Maybe he thought he had the golden touch, but the New Universe with DP7 and Kickers Incorporated, that was awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting looking back and putting some perspective on it, because it's not like everything was great. It's just it was so much better than a lot of what's happening now. But there's some of what's happening now that was better than some of what happened then.
Well, but memory is a funny thing. We choose to remember the good stuff, at least,
Well, yeah, hopefully, right?
When you were a little kid, you remember all that great stuff, but you don't remember falling down and getting hurt.
Looks like we got a new universe fan. Okay. There you go. Justin is asking Darkhawk.
Darkhawk, that's it. Thank you, Justin. Darkhawk. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I dug Darkhawk. I liked Sleepwalker more.
I try to be nice.
But yeah, I mean, I felt like they did a lot of different things. That it just was. I don't know. They could have done more with them. But it's nothing like today.
I went to John Romita Senior's house. He lived next door to one of my coworkers, and we talked. And I was asking him about Ditko and just Marvel in general. And one of the things he said about the new universe was, and this is John Romita saying it, that Jim Shooter just said, "Hey, let's make comic books. What do you got? What do you got?" People just went, this. Like nobody had a burning desire to this is the character that I've been holding in my pocket for 10 years. I just want to make this. It was kind of like, okay, I need 10 comics. What do you got? Okay, go do it. And that's what it felt like.
Yeah. So now let's get back into the 90s part of comics.
Sure.
Let's kind of hit, I guess, on the late 90s into early 2000s. What were you doing at that point in terms of comic book reading and things like that?
I was done with school, and I moved back to New York, and I was the brokest I've ever been. I just entered the workforce after college, and I think my comic book buying output was at an all-time low. I'm trying to think but I was still getting Fantastic Four, Avengers. I was probably still getting Superman and Batman, but nothing like I didn't even know about CrossGen. CrossGen just came and went. Remember that company? And that now I'm buying back issues of CrossGen. They are phenomenal, and I don't even remember seeing them. And then once I started, at this point I was a school teacher, and I started making regular good money and everything. I started buying everything again, and then I discovered eBay, and I started filling in collections, and I started buying collections from people. Oh man, I kind of went overboard. This was the point where I went from a normal comic book collector to a crazy person that put stuff in storage units and went on the weekend and just organized comics. I literally, at this point, I had no back issues to read. Like if I bought the comics, I would go to the White Castle and sit in the White Castle and read the weekly comics before I went home. And then I started. Now I still have 22 long boxes of comics I haven't even read yet. This is all from this period, this lunatic period.
You got the bug. The bug bit you back hard.
eBay was like the best thing and the worst thing to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever get into, I guess going back a little bit, you ever get into the trading cards from the early 90s?
Oh, no. I purposely limited myself of obsessions because I can tell you're probably like me. We get a little obsessive compulsive about our hobbies. So I was into music, and I was into comics, and I was into role-playing games. So I had 3 huge obsessions. If I wasn't reading a comic, if I wasn't hunting down a rare Punk 45 or something, I was writing an adventure for D&D in a notebook that, I would write obsessive, like every stat of every character, what they had in their pockets, because if they accidentally or on purpose just murdered this guy, what was in, how many gold coins did this guy have? I still have notes of my universe of because I played a superhero role-playing game, but my friends like Dungeons & Dragons, so I compromised, and every other week we do superheroes. But how those worlds, there was like warps that they could interact, and then the nature. How did the warps get there? Just a crazy person. If anybody's interested, you could go to www. whatever it is, villains-and-vigilantesforum.com. That's the name of I've been running that website since the mid 90s. I think it's
no way.
And it's all my role-playing stories.
Wow.
Yeah. Bill Willingham was a member before I had to reboot it because of software issues. I reminded him on Twitter, and he's like, "Oh my God, I haven't been there in 20 years."
Let's see. Which superhero game? Marvel?
It was. I played Marvel, but this game was called Villains and Vigilantes.
Villains and Vigilantes.
And it's funny because Bill Willingham got his start creating content for that game. So you could see early Dan Panosian, early Bill Willingham doing Villains and Vigilantes. So villains-and-vigilantesforum.com. That's my website. I've been doing that before for 30 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you're talking to a crazy obsessive person. Yeah, I got no problems admitting that.
Hey, that's fine. Hey, it's what we're all about here, I got to agree with GJ, and this, I guess maybe it was because it hit at the right time. Saying that he loved trading cards since a kid. Best memories were from trading cards in the 90s that formed a connecting poster. I forget the series.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe someone can chime in on that.
I remember that. I was working in a comic store at the time. I remember that. That was fun. I just couldn't do it. Like nowadays, I got a bunch of friends out here who are into Warhammer, and begging me to play, and I'm like, that's like it's like $1,000-$2,000 commitment, and then you got to paint because they're not going to play with me if I don't paint my miniatures,
I hear you.
And it looks fun. It looks like something I want to do.
Yeah, I see those things all the time. Even my wife, we go into a comic shop, and she's like, "Man, I don't know what this is. I just want to get one."
I see,
and I was like,
you can see behind me board games. I twice, maybe 3 times a week, I host board games, cook a dinner, and we sit at my table. We play board game. So I got too many obsessed. What stamp collecting now? We want to collect stamps. Yeah, my personally says, I can't even talk. I drank too much coffee. Yes, it is a lifestyle commitment, and I would love to. If I didn't have to work a full-time regular job, I would be playing Warhammer too, but I don't.
I hear you. Yeah, the comic cards were great for me because I didn't have a whole lot of money as a kid. And it was like, you get a comic or you get a pack of cards. And most of the time I ended up getting a pack of cards because I wanted to learn more about the characters. And then as I learned about the characters, I was like, okay, I'll go hunt down a comic that looks cool, and pick out an issue. And so that really helped me get more familiar with the universe of all the different characters, whether it was Marvel, DC, or whatever. And then at that point in time, they made trading cards for everything. Every single TV show, movie, toy line, whatever it was, had trading cards. It was incredible.
The cards I collected were the original Star Wars cards, and for the life of me, I don't know where they went. They just disappeared.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
That was a good series too.
Yeah.
So now going into the 2000s, at this point in time, comics for me were a little bit odd. I got into some of them, and then I got out in a big way. Once Civil War ended, that was it for me. I kind of got into it at that point, and I'm the whole time thinking like, okay, the villains are really going to be in this. They're behind it. There's something, they're going to take advantage. There's going to be a big fallout from it, right? And it was just like, heroes just fighting heroes. Is depressing at the end of it.
It was depressing. I look at the Civil War because, let's face it, we love when Spider-Man fights Captain America. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a trope that the heroes fight. But, like, there was something like more innocent when you see like Herb Trimpe or Don Heck showing a Moon Knight throwing a punch at the Human Torch or something like that. And then, it was a mistake. And then they're buddies. But the Civil War, they're like shooting guns at each other and
they're trying to kill each other.
And to tell you the truth, I didn't think that the argument was worth it. Like it basically boiled down to, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I sit at my Thanksgiving table, half my family's this, half my family's. Can you imagine if I just got up and punched one of my cousins? And then what?
Even worse, right?
We're supposed to be buddies. Hey, it was just a misunderstanding. Like, how can Iron Man be friends with Captain America ever again? Like, Pete, if you just walked over here and punched me in the face, I'd be like, get out of my house. I don't care what your point is at this point. So that's why I looked at the Civil War. I was like, yeah, I wanted to see the superheroes fight. Every superhero fan does. But the argument needed to be worth it. And it was basically a political disagreement. And I just thought it was like, little did I realize that it foreshadowed today that everybody's choosing sides and ready to beat the crap out of each other, over politics.
Yeah.
It's not what I wanted in my comic books.
Yeah, that's when I think a lot of it started to, and admittedly, I'm ignorant as to a lot of the stuff at this point because anything I see of it, nothing of it pulls me in. Whether it's in a comic shop, whether it's online, whatever it is, none of it's pulling me in. And I checked out of Marvel in a big way after Civil War, and then I checked out of DC after the New 52 got launched, and then that was it for me.
It was a great end point for me. I'm like, all right. And then 2015, what was it? The second Secret Wars or the third Secret? I don't even know anymore. But that was.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
that was actually pretty good. I actually liked that. But I was like, I remember reading a Black Panther comic, and I'm trying to remember who the writer was, and he's talking about how they had the Rhino, and he wasn't a Russian guy. I forget what it was, and I'm like, this isn't the Rhino's nationality. The Russian, isn't he a Russian guy? A Russian American or whatever. and they changed, and I'm like, this writer doesn't understand Marvel history, and it really bugged me. I'm like, okay, I'll forget it. And then they said that the Wakandans, like 1,000 years ago, had the cure for cancer, but they're going to withhold it until the rest of the world lives up to their standards. And I'm just like, oh, so they're the bad guys. You know what I mean? Like, so my grandma died of cancer because she didn't meet your standards. So I don't know. I started. So I'm trying to think of what year that was, but it started to leave a bad taste in my mouth, and then they started like just flagrantly disregarding past writers, and it just bothered me. So it was all this breaking continuity, and this was before like 2016, where it just went berserkowitz with politics. So I was noping out just because of like the disrespect to the previous continuity, and obviously these writers just didn't seem to know Marvel history, you know. You've heard the story that I was one of your boy Zach's insiders. I was the electrician for Marvel Comics.
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay, Brian Bow. I love Brian Bow. He does Wolf and Batsy on Pete's comic book company. Why can't I think anymore? I love Wolf and Batsy. One of my top 3 comics right now. Oh my god, it's so good. But anyway, I just got hired. So I quit school teaching. I got hired as an electrician, and I was an apprentice. So and I'm helping out. And I found out that my company had a contract for Marvel, and at this point I was wearing Marvel shirts and everything. So like, yeah, next time Marvel calls, you're going. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I hope Marvel is a blackout so I could go there. And then I finally went, and it was like the worst. It was dark. It's a musty basement.
Around what time is this? What year?
This is around 2010.
Okay.
I should have got my pass. I still have it hanging up, my pass to get into Marvel. But it was just everybody. There was too many people packed into cubicles. There was like no joy, and I had to go up.
You're like the 4th person I've heard describe it that way at that point in time.
Yeah, and I had to go up into the drop ceiling. So I'm moving the drop ceiling over, and there's a splice box, and I'm literally figuring out how to rewire it because one of the outlets kept going out. And so I'm rewiring it to go on I got my amp meter, find out which is the wire with the lowest, whatever. I'm getting too technical. But around my ladder, they're having an editorial meeting, and they're talking about making an event for Marvel. And these people are the editors, and they're saying the wrong things. They're talking about this character debuted. And I'm like, no, that character debuted in George Perez's Inhumans run. This isn't a human. He's not a mutant. This was Jim Starlin, and I'm up on the ladder going, do I get down off this ladder and correct these people? And I decided against it because I represent my company. I'm on company time. I'm a professional. So I bit my tongue. But that meme of that kid who's like this when his face is going to explode?
Yeah.
That was me through this whole meeting.
You got the veins coming out in the forehead.
Yeah. And I just remember because there was one guy who was like the liaison between like the electricians and carpenters, stuff like that in Marvel Comics. So we in a room, and I just had to say something. I told him, I was like, this is ridiculous. This guy doesn't know this guy, and he started laughing. And he goes, "You're a comic book fan?" And the guy with me is like, "This guy eats, breathes, and poops comics. We call him the comic book." And I was like, "Oh man, I had to say something before I left this building." And then they gave me a big armful of comic books and sent me on my way, so it wasn't that bad. But
oh man, they should have hired you.
I was like ready to make my stand. Like you have no business talking comic books,
Did you remember any? You remember any names?
Yeah, I remember a few names. I don't want to say names.
Okay,
but I remember the guy who was leading the meeting. I was just like, and it's funny because he shortly went to DC and destroyed that vertical. And he destroyed the vertical line in less than a year.
Okay. I know who you're talking about. Makes sense. Makes sense. Man, oh man, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, I was just reading Jefferson Roswell. Civil War was a commentary on post 9/11 patriot. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but it wasn't skillfully done, and that's the problem. Like whenever people say, "Oh, it's always politics in comics," there's 2 answers to that. Like we always bring up the Green Lantern. Hard traveling heroes with Neil Adams, what I mean. Green Lantern was the conservative Green Lantern, whatever. He was the conservative. He was the liberal, but it didn't sell. If you remember, they had to quickly stop that. It only lasted like 6 or 7 issues or 7. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
Steve Englehart's Secret Empire with the president was demoralized and he.
Well, yeah. To
They brought
me,
it.
what I loved about did you ever see the Justice League animated series
Oh,
with
excellent!
Dwayne McDuffie, right? So
Probably the best.
remember, yeah, remember that whole arc with the Justice Lords?
Yes.
Okay, so it was like this dystopia kind of thing. Superman's running around lobotomizing everybody. You know, they're all kind of doing this because the Flash gets killed and Superman goes off the rails, lobotomizes Luthor, lobotomizes, Doomsday and the actual Earth, et cetera, causes that whole split. So that, to me, is a good excuse to have these heroes combat. Here you have this one version of them that's taken things so far that they've become totalitarian and exactly what they hate.
Right.
Under the guise of keeping things safe, keeping things nice, and all this. But now it's because the whole world is essentially under their thumb. So that's a good reason to play off of, you're asking these questions. You're kind of having these philosophical themes play out. If in Civil War, if let's say Cap and Iron Man find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been abducting or harboring villains or anyone that's suspected to be a villain, and then doing horrible things to them, executing them, doing the same sort of things, lobotomizing them, whatever it may be, then I could see that turning into maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. against the Marvel superheroes. And that's some kind of a civil war in a way, because S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't necessarily supposed to be doing things of that level of a nature.
You just gave me a interesting pitch for a comic. Let's go over to Marvel and get that comic made.
So then you could have that play out. You could have these philosophical themes play out. But when it became like the heroes doing it, and it's like, yeah, like you said, everyone loves seeing the hero fights,
Right.
but it's because it was rare, it was fleeting, it was kind of this thing that you were like, oh, how are they gonna get out of this one, and what's the misunderstanding that eventually you go, what are they after, So there was a lot of different ways that they could have still explored those themes, but I thought at the time it was going to be like some kind of mind control involved, that sort of aspect of it, something where and then the villains were going to take over. If I recall correctly, I believe Iron Man was even hiring villains to go after the Cap's side, which was strange.
Were they like recruiting super teams for, of every state, and they were like half of them were villains?
Yeah, exactly. So that was just, I don't know. But so I loved that Justice League stuff. Holy smokes.
I love that whole Paul Dini animated series, Batman, Superman, Justice League, by far is the best superhero cartoons of all time.
Oh yeah.
To the point, like I bought them. I have DVDs of them all because I'm afraid that they're going to be like digitally edited at some point, and I want to remember them the way I remember. They're awesome cartoons.
Oh yeah, because they do touch upon a bunch of different things where I could see that becoming too questionable one day.
There's one scene where Rorschach breaks into not Rorschach. The Question breaks into Lex Luthor's office. And he goes, Superman can't do what he has to do because Superman's a Boy Scout. And as he's talking, he's taking off his tie. He's going to strangle Lex Luthor. This lunatic. It was, and then, of course, Superman comes in and stops him. But it was like, I thought that was just wonderful character. He goes, I'm a crazy person. Nobody cares. They expect me to act like this. And, he's going up to Lex Luthor. I thought that was great. And kids could enjoy it. I'm a big advocate of all ages comic books. I think there's nothing wrong with comic books for adults, just adults, but I think we got to get comic books into the hands of little kids. That's why I like what you're doing with the Alternoween, giving out comic books. You had Mighty Mascots, you had why can't I think of the other one, the Baron Rat that I
there's a lot of all ages comics that have been here at Alterna. Yeah, totally. Mr. Crypt, the actual Roger, Legends of Log, we had a bunch of them.
And they were fun. And we forget all those Berg and Claremont X-Men. Those were all ages. As an adult, I read about the Hellfire Club, and I realized that was Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But as a kid, I thought they were just a scary group of villains. Which is
I mean, that's the fun part, is that the Hellfire Club had a long history within the real world of being a very sordid group.
Right.
And then they turn that into, this kind of a thing where you get these aristocratic types that have been, they're still relatively doing weird things, but there's a little bit more of that comic book bend to it.
Right. And then it gets me so mad that in Marvel they're having the Hellfire Gala every year. I mean, can you imagine if DC had this is the Jeffrey Epstein Island issue? Let's have the Jeffrey
Epstein's Island Paradise.
Yeah, don't you guys at Marvel know what the Hellfire Club was? What
they probably don't. They probably
don't.
don't.
Used her until she became Dark Phoenix.
Well, see, there's the other part of it, though, right? So we're talking about you can have any kind of story. I'm a firm believer of it. You can have any kind of story, tackle any kind of topic, any kind of theme, and make it interesting and make it applicable to the character, to the setting, whatever it may be. Even turn something that's very maybe more thematically appropriate for an adult, but find the right notes that make it more appropriate for all ages.
Absolutely agree.
Right. So you could take the Hellfire Gala, and what it is, it's the villains having an event.
Right.
Not
Captain
that
America shouldn't be going there. Captain America, Spider-Man shouldn't be going there.
And every year the villains have this event. They're trying to have like their weird own little Bilderberger meeting, and they're trying to be secretive about it. And every year,
your territory here.
Yeah. And every year it turns into, how do we now crash this? The heroes, how do they now prevent it? How do they crash it? And every year the villains are like, how do we evade the heroes? How do we make sure we get more and more secretive and exclusive?
Camera and he's taking pictures for proof for the Daily Bugle.
Right. You could have it into an annual event, because they are having this weird annual meeting that's called something else publicly, but within the comic, if you're in the know, it's called the Hellfire Gala. So in a villain, you're getting invited to the Hellfire Gala, but publicly you're invited to like the World Peace Organization.
Can I get back? Marcus Kellegrew had a comment. He says, come on in, John, those names are blocked by you now anyway. When I was talking about it, I didn't want to mention names. I've been going.
Oh,
let me calm down.
There it is.
Oh, there you go. So, Marcus, thank you for this. Is going to make me laugh. But I've been inviting people to come on my channel. On Wednesdays, I have live chats with comic creators and fans. I'm not a star chaser. I'll talk to fans. When I first started, I was interviewing my buddies. So if you're a comic book fan and you want to be on my channel, tell me what you want to talk about, and we'll go. You don't have to be Grant Morrison or whatever. But I was just going out, and I hate to say spamming, but I was going after people. Hey, you want to come on my channel? You want to go on my channel? Blocked. People I've never interacted with. I'm blocked. So you know what? I'm going to go Andy Helfer and see if I'm blocked by this person who didn't know his comic book history when I was doing an electrician for Marvel Comics. You know what I mean? And it's funny. I had one guy scheduled. I'm a big fan of this guy. He was going to come on in 3 weeks, and then I just went to go remind him, and I'm blocked.
Oh, wow.
So...
I wonder who it was.
John McCrae. Artist on Hitman. One of my favorite comics of all time. And now, I'm not going to bring up politics if you don't want to bring up politics. I'd rather just talk about great comic books, and this is what makes me laugh is, I wear my politics on my sleeve. I lean conservative, but I'll talk to Gail Simone if she wants to talk comic books. You know what I mean? I'll Kelly Sue Connick, you want to come on my channel? We'll talk comic books, and have an honest discussion. Talk about if she wants to say that comics are booming, and I'll say comics aren't booming, and we want to keep it civil. I think that would be awesome. I'll talk to Dan Slott. Why not? And I even put pictures on Twitter today of me hanging out with Dan Slott. My wife used to say I was the Dan Slott fanboy. I was the only fan of Dan Slott in the world. And then I reach out to see if he wanted to talk to me, and I'm blocked by this guy.
Yeah.
I don't understand. And I remember that's one of the things I learned about you that made me interested in alternatives. You were like a big proponent of don't block people. Unless it's personal. Yeah,
if you have like a bad interaction with people, I get it, But in terms of like that preemptive block list kind of nonsense and that weird, whatever, guilt by association, I'm like...
How many, like your boy Zach said, how many less fans would make you happy? How many less customers would...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, especially in terms of when it comes to guilt by association. So let's say they don't like you, so they block everybody who follows you. You follow however they want to do it.
Right.
So now it turns into, how many people on Twitter even like interact with each other based on followings, you're probably talking about 5% of your followings really interact with you on a consistent basis.
Correct.
So now like 95% of those people who are just like, yeah, a comic account, follow, whatever, who aren't even aware. Now they're getting blocked by this other person.
Or they liked the video I did on Fantastic Four.
Yeah, it's insanity. And I absolutely get it. People have their disagreements. I get it, 100%. And do whatever you got to do at that point. And I understand. But when it comes to that, and you're just going to run in there and block like thousands upon thousands of people or whatever it may be, I don't see at that point. Instead of stepping back, you should go, you know what? I don't think social media is right for me. I don't think Twitter's right for me. I don't think I could actually be on here. Because if that's the tool I have to use, going back to like things like the Justice Lords, right?
Yeah.
If the Justice Lords have to use the tool of the villain to be heroes, are they really heroes?
Right.
Right. So if you have to act in a villainous way to be a hero, are you really a hero? And so you would expect people that are writing these things for a living and crafting these stories to understand that concept. But then again, it turns into, well, maybe that's why the stories are the way they are.
Yeah, there's a weird sickness going on in mainstream comics. And like I said before, 2015, I felt like I cut off a limb when I was done with Marvel and DC. And I was really depressed. Like, I remember telling my wife, now what do I do? I was really depressed. And then I discovered you and Alterna Comics, and I started realizing there was crowdfunded comics and indie comics. And I'm more excited than ever. I mean, look at me. Now I'm talking to you. I talked to Eric July. I talked to Ethan Vescov. I talked to Cat Ironwood. Holy mackerel, was I excited. I don't know if people know who Cat Ironwood was, but she, to me, I think is one of the most important unsung heroes in comic books of all time. She was the editor-in-chief of Eclipse Comics, which started creator-owned rights for comic books. I don't think the concept of creator-owned comics would exist without this woman. And I just looked her up, got her phone number, and gave her a call. And an hour later, we're live talking. You know what I mean? And she's a communist. She's an avowed witchy communist. We couldn't be more politically different. And it was the most exciting, fun conversation I've had in a long time. And I'm sure we would disagree on just about everything, but we talked about comic books. It was wonderful. I may be a jerk, but I'm not a bad guy. I'll talk to you if we disagree. I would love to have Mark Waid on. I'm sure that guy would. I'm mature enough. I can talk to people I disagree with.
I'm not going to say on every issue people can find common ground, unfortunately.
No, I'm not that much of a hippie dippy. No.
I've largely found that, though, on most issues, people have more common ground on them than they realize. It's just how you reach that through policy being enacted by the government.
Well, just
where people disagree.
Every religion has the same basic tenets.
Yeah.
Peace, whatever, but they're different. It's, how do you get? And I think every government kind of has the same concept. We don't really want war. We leave people alone, but they obviously go about it in different ways. But whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. GJ says the comics that I enjoy are the ones I've backed and would like to see more of that than from Marvel or DC, but that's not happening until things change. But will they? And I honestly don't see it really changing. I don't really see it changing because of the corporate structure involved. I think if the companies were, and John, feel free to agree, disagree. I think if the companies were still primarily comic book companies, right? Not owned by a larger corporation or whatever it is. DC and Warner Brothers seem to have a good understanding for a while, but obviously that's not even close to what it used to be in terms of ownership at this point. I think if they were primarily comic companies, relying on comic books, and the properties that they're doing and making and the characters and the merchandise, and they had more of a control over that, I think we would see a very different landscape when it comes to that. But because they're not, and they're owned by larger companies, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing.
I had Frankie Washington on my channel. He does a lot of the covers for your comic. It came out on a Wednesday. Great guy. What a pleasure he was to talk to. And he said something that really opened up my eyes, and I can't stop thinking about it. He says comic books are just like flyers. And he goes, you know, your supermarket or your real estate agent just throws out a circular and they'll just spam the neighborhood. And it's just a loss just to get the name out there. He goes, that's what comic books are to these major corporations. They're not looking at them. They kind of don't even expect to make money. He goes, you know, he goes, so yeah, here's Captain Marvel, here's you know, Brie Larson, here's whatever, Captain America, whatever. But just spam it out there, throw it out, just to keep it kind of in the public eye, but we don't really care. It's a loss. It's just a circular. It's just a flyer. Here, you throw this away, you know, and you look at it, you throw it away, because the movies are where the money is. Now the movies are kind of bombing, so I'm wondering if the movies bomb, nobody cares anymore, because nobody's going to the theater anymore. You know, I'm kind of thinking this might course correct comics, but you know what? I don't care. I'm such an obsessive compulsive. I can't jump back into Marvel now because there's an 8-year gap, and I'm not buying 8 years worth of comics that I don't like. So it's gone. Sorry, Marvel. Sorry, DC.
And and that's a good way to. That's a good way to get into the next topic, and then we'll close out with this. Is the advent of a lot of the independents that we're seeing coming out nowadays, right? So we're seeing a whole lot of stuff where people who have felt like, you know, maybe comics are no longer a thing in their life. You know, maybe if the big companies don't want me and the creators don't want me there, I guess comics don't want me anymore either. And now we're seeing so many people creating independent comics in a way that is way more engrossing, engaging, interactive, all that kind of stuff, utilizing social media as a way to promote and market, networking in a more positive kind of way, you know, utilizing cooperation and competition to achieve something that hasn't been achieved yet. You know, and I think it's a really exciting time for a lot of people, because primarily what has been the main focus for a lot of entertainment companies, storytelling, whatever it may be, has been the injection of new stories, new characters, new things. And we're seeing a cycle within entertainment that is regurgitating remakes and all this other stuff, reboots over and over and over again. But then here comes independent media across the board, and not just comics. And now they're actually the ones where new things are being made and done, even if they're still influenced or inspired by the things that came before, because that's just kind of the course of how things go naturally anyway. They're still trying to achieve and attain something new. And I think people who want that type of stuff, as soon as they find it, it's that new rabbit hole you go down, and you're like, whoa, it's a whole new world of new stuff.
Right. But I like my brother. He likes the Marvel movies. He you know, he likes superheroes. He grew up. I'm talking about my little brother. He saw my comic books, but he's not just going to wake up and go, yeah, I wonder if there's comic books on the computer that I could look for and buy. You know, I'm willing to do that stuff. But then again, I was the kind of guy that looked for punk bands and got the 45s of bands before they were signed to labels. So now I'm online looking for comic books, and, you know, oh, this is cool. I never saw this before. You know, Belmont Comics. I like this. This, you know, this Smokes the Fox. This Wolf and Batsy. These are awesome. But the average person isn't going to do the work. And we need, like, I brought this up to Eric July. I'm like, you got the money, you got the know-how. Could he be the new Stan Lee? Because there's no, you know, Pete, you're doing this. You're the new Stan Lee too, in a way, because you're.
Well, everybody needs to be Stan
Lee. Right. That's what I'm saying.
And everyone should have been Stan Lee the whole time.
My grandmother knew who Stan Lee was. You know, my brother, my older brother, who's a big biker guy, never bought a comic book in his life. He saw Stan Lee and he was like, "That's Stan Lee. That's Stan Lee." You know what I mean? He got all excited. You know, so I'm like, I said to Eric July, I said, could you be the guy? Like, I could bring my comic book to you, and you be like Eclipse Comics or Image Comics, and get them into stores, and because that's kind of what we need. As much as I love Alterna, I love you know, Cyberfrog comics, but the average person in the street, you know, they walk by 7-Eleven, there's no comic books. Nobody, like when Chuck Dixon said this to me, I actually felt like I got hit by lightning. He says, nobody just wakes up in the morning, turns off the TV and says, you know what, I'm going to get into comic books, and then walks into a comic book store. He said that the comic book store was the beginning of the death of comic books. He says the newsstand was like the drug dealer on the corner. Come here, kid. Here's your first hit. And then And then you went to the crack house later on. That was the comic books. But nobody just wakes up and says, I'm going to the crack.
That's a hell of an analogy.
You know what I'm saying? And he's right, but I never thought of it because all my life I've been going to comic book stores.
You needed both. One hand washed the other. And as soon as it was, the money is guaranteed, the sales are guaranteed.
Right.
As soon as that happened, pull out of the newsstand, pull out of the convenience store, pull out of the grocery store.
Right.
We experienced this. I had a lot of conversations with different companies when we were doing this with Newsstand in 2019. And then when we left, we were in there 2017 to 2019 with Newsstand. First of all, when we got into Newsstand in 2017, even though it was a delayed release of 2 months, so first the comic shop would get it, 2 months later the Newsstand would get it, right? So the comic shop got it first. Comic shops boycotted us as soon as we got into Newsstand. A lot of them ganged up all together. They're selling at newsstands. They're selling at Barnes & Noble. They're selling here.
That's stupid thinking because, I listen to Pandora.
And the whole point, the whole point of us getting them into Newsstand was to actually drive sales to comic shops.
Right.
Because we would put on the back cover, we had an ad there that said to go to your local comic shop.
I remember those ads.
Yeah. And we used a whole back cover that we could have made $200 to $300 in advertising space. We did that instead to drive sales with the comic shop locator on the back cover. And we wanted people to go to their comic shop to pick up the current issue that would have been there because everything was on a 2-month thing. And so to have the comic shops do that and feel like, oh no, they're jaded and they're upset. And I even talked to some and I was like, look, do you sell Funko Pop? Do you sell anything else that's sold outside of a comic shop? They didn't have an answer for me as to why to justify not.
I never thought of that. You're absolutely right.
As to why to not justify boycotting them when they aren't selling exclusive items through their shop only and they sell them everywhere else as well.
Right.
I was like, anything that's carried on Amazon, do you carry that in your shop? Do you carry graphic novels? I was like, what's the difference? If anything, the difference here is actually bringing business to your store. If there's a comic shop in someone's area and they discover this at a Books A Million, a Barnes & Noble, a newsstand, a convenience store. We had a newsstand at Rockefeller Center that was carrying comics and that was doing really well. Dude actually reached out directly to us to tell us about it. So it was one of these things that the unfortunate side of the newsstand was obviously that, but the other side of it was that most of the newsstands did not care for accountability on any level because it was full returnability. A lot of them took advantage of that. And even though they might have 20 copies that came in, they would scan through 25 got returned, even though maybe they sold through half of them. And I would see the reports come in. It would be really, really strange. And I would talk to our distributor. And I was like, why are we getting negative returns? We didn't send, if we sent 2,000 copies out, let's say, and we're getting back 2,020 as return numbers, every one of them plus an extra 20 got returned. And they said, oh, what they must be doing is this because we don't have them rip the covers anymore. We don't have them provide physical proof. They scan the barcode. And I was like, that whole system sounds like it's just ready to be gamed.
Yeah.
So the only way to ensure, and this was unfortunate.
I could see
this was unfortunate but good. But the only way to ensure sales was to actually purchase a space. And we did that with Toys R Us. We did that right before the Christmas, right before they went under. And we still actually have readers from it because we had them at the top 200 stores purchased right at the register. And they were right there, the all ages titles. Toys R Us, talking to the Toys R Us rep.
So good.
Yeah, and talking to the Toys R Us rep, they actually were going, you know how difficult it's been to get quality comics here? Toys R Us telling me that they were so glad to get our comics in their store because it was so difficult to get quality comics that they could put at the register because a lot of the comics, they felt like they shouldn't go to the register. Yeah, because they had carried some things from Marvel and DC, and I think they had some Walking Dead even at the time, but it was usually in the toy aisle. And then they didn't have anything they felt that was appropriate for the register. And even if they did and they carried it, there wasn't anything that really made sense. It would be something that just it wasn't being someone that would approach them. So it wasn't like IDW with whatever kind of licensed titles they had, and they would be approaching them to be on the register or whatever it is. So I think if someone is to go about it and get them back into bigger retail again, it's possible, but the only way that it's worth it is to purchase a spot at the register. Because if you don't get the sale, you're going to get at least the advertising out of it. But again, at the time, 2019, I'd say that a spot at the register for like the top 100, I don't know, Target stores, let's say, it costs like $2,000. And then you did a 50-50 split on what was earned. So it depends what your price point is. It depends what your marketing is going to be. It depends, how good's your cover. Is it going to be attention grabbing? Are you burying the title? Make sure you design it properly.
Imagine you go to 7-Eleven, you get yourself some Pringles, and there's horse
there's a way to go about it. There's retailers out there that could do it, but you need the money to get out there and make it a thing. But the other side of it is in terms of getting these placements done in big grocery stores, big box stores, whatever it may be, department stores. Largely, I got to tell you, when we were talking to the newsstand distributor about it, it was difficult because of the fact that most of the publishers left in such a hurry from newsstand and didn't go back that they didn't even have sales data to compare it to. So now they look at it and they go, magazine sales are doing pretty bad. Right. That's all we have to go based on. That's it. And they go, we're not really going to carry the comic.
I don't see anybody reading magazines on the train, and I don't even see magazines being sold anywhere. Like the only time I see magazines is if I go into a Barnes and Nobles. Yeah. And then when I go to Barnes and Nobles, it's comics over here, and then manga. Somebody that asked me if I read manga. Yeah, I read manga. I kind of missed it. I missed the boat on manga. I'm too old, but my nieces and nephews, I got like 35 nieces, and they all read manga. And I gave a few of them comics. I gave a couple of the young ones Baron Rat comics, and they looked at me and they said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a comic book. You'll like it." And it said, "What's a comic book?" These are little kids, so they don't even know a comic, but they all know manga. They're telling me about One Piece and One Punch Man and everything.
Well, here's the other part too. Jefferson Roswell says the young kids are into manga and Dogman now. Modern comic customers are 30 plus. How can kids discover comics again? Is it too late? The thing is that at this point in time, what it is that there's so much corporate ownership across the board. Scholastic owns practically every premium end cap that you could get in Barnes & Noble. In some cases, Scholastic purchasing different spots in Barnes & Noble is actually what has kept Barnes & Noble afloat up until very recently when they got purchased by a hedge fund. And we're talking maybe like 3 years ago that occurred, 3 or 4 years ago.
And Scholastic is politically...
Scholastic they're also like a record company where they want you to make sure that the star is the star right now. If we start growing another star, it's because the other one is fading out. So they're not going to have a competitive star to fight off against Dogman, right? And whatever else that they think is their top sellers. That's just not how Scholastic works. So Scholastic, what happens here is that as they create younger readers, they're not really creating a lot of intermediary kind of entertainment in terms of comics for readers, right? Not a lot of stuff that you go from a transition of you're a little kid reading these things to then you can be like 12 to 13, then you can be 17 to 18, then you can be an adult. There's not a lot of that occurs with Scholastic. So there is a cutoff. But what I'm seeing is this. It's a war of attrition. And what I mean by that is the longer that comic creators can last, the audience eventually comes to you. So the more that you're doing everything you're doing and you keep at it and you keep selling to the 30 plus, whatever it may be, the younger audience that was into comics or is going to come around to it again looking for other things to read, they're not going to go to the stores because they never knew that they were there to begin with. They're going to go online. And where they're going to go online and they're going to discover them is places like this, YouTube, social media, all over the place. Searching on Amazon, searching wherever else, everywhere else that they buy stuff, that's where they're going to go. So the audience eventually comes to you because they age, they get older. So that's the thing is that in terms of little kids getting comics, Alternoween is great in terms of having us get out there. You guys help out. You're giving comics out on Halloween, trick-or-treats, and putting the comics in their hands and getting that emotion involved for the kids, making them feel like, wow, what a great night, Halloween. I got a comic and I got candy and I'm having a great time. And wow, I enjoy this comic book. I want to get more of them. Whether they get more Alterna or more comics in general, it's a win. But the fact is that we have to make sure we're doing what we can do in general as creators and readers to keep enough good stuff alive and going. I think we are doing that as that audience ages, they'll discover comics. And they're not going to discover them by going to the store and browsing, because they never knew that they were there to begin with. They're going to discover them by doing the thing that they're doing already, which is going online and looking up and searching. What's out there? What else is going on?
I just find I don't know, that we're kind of failing kids. When I say we, I mean all of us who like comic books. Look at more. I wouldn't want if I don't have kids, but if I had kids, I don't want them reading about superheroes going to a Hellfire gala and then maybe getting interested in Hellfire and then finding out what it really is. I'm like, why would Spider-Man be going there? It's and then all like the weird old politics, and I don't know. I think the Marvel and DC, they got movies that are making $1 billion and they can't sell a freaking comic book over 40,000 copies. You know, I don't know. The question of how to get comic books into everybody's hands, it's, if I knew the solution, I'd be printed comic books right now. So I'm honestly asking people, because I want to know what Pete thinks. You've been in the game longer than most. You know, Eric July just came out swinging and knocked it out of the park right away. You know.
Well, the thing is, Eric July is the equivalent of like Scholastic, right? So Eric July came in, he built up a platform beforehand,
right?
Spent years and years doing that work, becoming established to his audience, and then was like, well, here, I'm working on a comic. You know, you've known I'm always interested in comics this entire time. And he found a way to say, here, audience that I've built up over the years, now I'm doing this. Check it out.
Right.
You know, so same thing with Scholastic. People go Scholastic. They treat them like they're an indie company that came out of nowhere, but Scholastic has dominated that space for decades.
Scholastic was in there when I was a kid.
So, yes.
Book fair.
So if Scholastic were to fail in that front, it's like, how did you fail?
Yeah,
you know, and that's why they don't have to aim so high. And you get things like Dogman.
Yeah, you know, but I don't know. I wish I knew the answer, because it seems like that's like one of the things I talk about every time I have, because I love comics. I want there to be comic books. I want to make comic books. You know, you want to make comics. You want to sell comics. I met a girl in college, and we were talking, and that flirting stage before you find, does she like me? Does she not like? And I was like, I'm being honest. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna all of a sudden let this girl realize I'm into comic books. And then she's like, what? So I was just like, I'm a big comic book collector. And she goes, oh yeah, I own a comic book store. Comic books are important. And then she just went off about how comic books are an American art form, like jazz. They're an important thing. You know, the Jack Kirby should be in a museum and being taught in textbooks. You know, and I'm like, and here I was afraid to talk about. And she opened up my eyes. Like, ever since her, I've never been ashamed of comic books. Like, they are important. They taught me to read. They taught me to be patriotic. They taught me to know that, like Superman taught me to know the difference between good and evil. You know, like, do the hard good thing rather than the easy evil thing, or the lazy evil thing. You know, I think, you know, comic books taught me, like, through good comic books, like of like a philosophical, should we do this? Should we not do this? And, you know, okay, I'm going to whatever and do the shortcut and ramifications. It made me think about it. It taught me the art of storytelling, you know, for my role-playing games. I don't know. I think comic books are an important thing. And, I don't want to see them die in my lifetime. And I'm 54 years old. I think I got a couple of decades left.
I don't think they're gonna die.
Yeah, I know. I'm being dramatic because I get emotional sometimes. But you know what I mean? I would love to see. Here I am saying I would love to see superhero movies in the movie theater every week. Look how that worked out. You know, so
right, yeah.
Careful what you wish for, you know.
Well, the thing about corporate comics at this point, it's the equivalent. I've made this comparison before. It's the equivalent of, you ever go and I know some people have done this. I have definitely driven past it. Your childhood home, right? You don't live in there anymore. Your parents sold it. Now someone else is in, and they've done something to the house. The house doesn't look, the house doesn't look the way, it used to look. You know, all the memories you have. Some of it's still there. Some of the facade is there, but a lot of it has changed. It's not your house anymore. Now, if you were to go and knock on the door, and they were nice enough to let you in, and you were like, oh, I used to live here as a kid. Do you mind if I look around? And you go to your childhood bedroom, and you're like, what the hell is this? Right? So you go in there and it's nothing like what it used to look like when you were a kid. And that's how a lot of the corporate comic companies are at this point for a lot of people. You go in there, you open up the comic, and you go, man, is it going to be just like it was when I was a kid and I loved it and it meant a lot to me? You open it up and you're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
It's the same address. You can still find it. It's right there. Some of the facade is still the same, but it's not the same at all. And people have to understand and accept the fact that at this point, it's never going back. It's never going to be the way it was.
Right.
And, it's a sobering thing to realize. But at the same time, what gives me hope and gives me a lot of stuff to be excited about is the fact that there are people who remember what that was like. There are people who want to try to recreate what it was like to read those stories, to get excited about stories like that, and carry on the tradition, pass the torch. And it doesn't need to happen necessarily at the specific company with the specific character. There's a lot of people that are, I think, aiming to keep the spirit alive of what it meant for that type of story to be around. So that's what I really love about what we're seeing with the indie sphere, and in terms of comics dying, I think, and this might sound brutal, I think the faster corporate comics die, the better it is. Because it's obviously not a space that they really care about on that level anymore.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I've told this story a few times. I'm friends with a couple of local comic book stores around here that are no longer around, and they said from 2005, like from the Iron Man movie to like Endgame, they said at least once a week a family would come in and like, oh, we saw whatever, we saw the new Marvel movie, and my kid wants to buy some comic books. I remember comic books, they were so good. But I got old, and then the kid's like, this isn't Captain America, and then he's like, okay, let me get Thor. Who's this woman with cancer? And then this isn't Iron Man. This is a little girl. This isn't Spider-Man. I don't recognize. This isn't even the guy in the movie. And then they would pick up some baseball cards or whatever, or a Funko Pop, and never come back. He said it happened every week. Marvel, it's almost like they shot themselves in the foot. What were you doing? Superman's not a teenage gay kid. You know what I mean? How can you make Superman movies and then have the character be somebody else? This is just, I'm not a marketing genius. I'm barely a functional person. And even I know, if you're going to have the movie with Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, you don't cast Buddy Hackett as Harrison Ford in your comic book. You know what I mean? It's got to look like... I get so mad,
I love Buddy Hackett.
Yeah, so do I.
But
I should have known you would have known.
But yeah, so I absolutely get what you're saying, and what happens with that is you get the cry from the fan that's like, look, it doesn't matter.
Do you remember that when they had the retailer summit and they were like, listen, I can't sell these comic books, and they were told that they were racist or whatever, and it's like, listen, even I'm trying to pay a mortgage here.
We see it even now, even something like on television, the Wonder Years, the remake that just got with the all black. Yeah, they did an all black cast. It's set in the 60s. I'm so glad
my wife just watches Hallmark channel.
And it looked horrible, and of course it got canceled right after 2 seasons. It was one of the lowest performing shows on the network. It was ABC. Right. So, of course it did, though. Now, if you made that show and it was an original show and it wasn't set in the 60s, so you can keep on playing up, oh, look how terrible race relations are. Now, when the first Wonder Years was out in the 80s and it was referencing something from 20 years ago, right, I get it. Okay. But like now it's 2023. If we're going to do any sort of Wonder Years, you want to reference 20 years ago, you're going to touch upon the time of 9/11. We're not going to go back to the 60s, but it's like there's a point to that. Yeah. And that's where the propaganda comes in. It's not about the storytelling. And you don't have to have these remakes. You don't have to have these reboots. You don't have to treat people as if like there's something that, race, skin color, gender, whatever it may be, sexuality is a costume change. It shouldn't be treated that way. If it's going to be part of the character, if it's going to be an intrinsically original character, it should be treated that way. And that's how you'll create things that last.
Very strict. If I'm going to see an adaptation of one of my beloved comics, and there's a race, gender, whatever swap, I'm done. I'm not watching it. If Superman, if they're making a Superman movie and Superman's wearing a yellow and green costume, that ain't Superman. Even if they keep everything else the same, Superman is red and blue. So like with Neil Gaiman, I love the Sandman, and then no disrespect to this actress, she's probably a wonderful person, and I would take the role too if they offered it to me. I'll be the fat, hairy guy who plays Death if they paid me. But comic books, they're colored like a character. Like Death is black and white. She's contrast. She's the absolute contrast. She's black and white. She's the sunny disposition of a morbid, abstract concept. And then in the movie, they hired a black woman. Now, fine, hire a black woman, but put her in white alabaster. I'm not even talking Caucasian, white alabaster. Give her the same color scheme as the comic book character. If you make Thor in the movies, Thor has a red cape and a blue costume. If you give him a yellow cape and mauve costume, that's not Thor. In comic books,
Yeah.
the color scheme is part of your branding. So I actually said that to Neil Gaiman on Twitter, and he called me a racist. I said, I'm not even talking about race. I'm talking about, like, this is the Spider-Man is red and blue. If you make a Spider-Man movie and he's yellow and purple, that's Hulk is red, Hulk is green and purple. You make Hulk any other color, that ain't the Hulk. But whatever. I'm wrong. I'm a jerk.
40% Zed says, you guys are trying to figure out how they could make such mistakes, but it's not mistakes. This is what they want. These people
Right.
wanted to destroy normalcy. Yeah, I'm not trying to figure out mistakes. I'm trying to detail events.
Right.
I know why they're doing what they're doing.
40% said I didn't believe that until I started watching RJ of the Fourth Age, and he did a whole bunch of videos. I can't even point to one, but he talked about like how specifically this guy sits and he listens to the interviews with these lunatics and quotes them and puts, I hate this term, but I can't think of any other, puts the receipts that shows that these people say we fundamentally wanted to change the comic book audience. We fundamentally wanted to change comic books. Well, how'd that work out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And
Good
honestly, it's a top-down initiative. It's a top-down initiative. Right. It's coming from various other things higher up than even those companies.
Right.
And then the companies aim to seek out to hire people who will fit that profile. I mean, that's not a conspiracy. That's not a guess. That's not a rumor. It's absolutely 100% inarguable truth at this point. And it's out there. There's tons of stuff that's out there about it.
They told Walt Simonson, nobody wants you anymore. Walt Simonson.
These are gigantic companies. These aren't like little tiny companies that are like, oh, we're just trying to stand out somehow and whatever it is. These are big, huge, mega conglomerate, multinational, transnational companies where it's across the entire globe. These aren't guys that are taking risks left and right. I mean, if anything, that's kind of some of the biggest problems is they don't take creative risks. So they're going about it, getting their orders from on high, getting them from top. They seem more like they're coming from below. But, so that's what's occurring. And it's not something where people go, oh, man, I don't understand. Why would they do this? This is such an obvious mistake. It's an obvious... No. As long as it's getting out there, as long as it's part of the paradigm shift that they're trying to push.
Yeah,
and it's a big, weird mess.
You're like me. You're a big conspiracy theory guy, and I've been saying this to my wife. The only difference between a conspiracy theory and reality is about 6 months. So,
Lately, yeah. But they want to paint it as if, they want to paint it as if, let's say the local store runs out of milk, and then you're coming up with the craziest excuse out of nowhere to be like, and that's why they're running out of milk. They're running out of milk because the chickens are having a revolt and they're picking on the cows, and the cows aren't feeling too good about themselves. And now the cows are getting a wind of it that they're not supposed to create more milk, so the cows stop producing milk. It's like, no, that's not that. That's crazy, right? So when it's a conspiracy theory, they're branding what would be considered 20 years ago maybe as solid detective work and logic. Right. They're now branding those things as conspiracy because everything's a conspiracy.
Lump everything into conspiracy theory. So even the stuff that like makes logical sense with all the crazy, the aliens did, that kind of guy with the who I'm talking about on TV. Put everything into one bucket, and then it's easy to attack that bucket. because whatever, it's straw man fallacy, right? Attack.
Yeah, yeah. All it is it's still, and comics were always pretty anti-establishment, and that's actually what we have going on today. We still have an establishment against anti-establishment. It's just the pendulum has swung, and it looks a bit different now, because before we were so used to thinking establishment equals this kind of political party, this kind of political thinking. But now we're seeing establishment is no, that's the merger of all of these people. It's a combination. It's even greater than politics at this point. Politics are just like a sliver of what makes up the establishment. So we're still seeing all of these independent movements, all of these things, small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who still want to see stories about underdogs, stories that are aspirational, stories where there's characters over, they're overcoming obstacles, and they're,
stories where something happens. Have you read a Marvel comic lately?
And that's anti-establishment, because establishment is already in power. Establishment's already there. They don't need to overcome anything.
I never thought I would live long enough where Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols said that the that the conservatives and the Republicans are the new punk rockers, because they're the anti-establishment. I'm like, Johnny Rotten said this? Holy mackerel! He goes, all the liberals run everything.
Yeah, and it's the same thing ever. As soon as the anti-establishment becomes the establishment, as soon as they become what they seek to destroy, they all of a sudden realize, man, I like being here. I like this power. I like this dynamic.
Human nature. And
then it turns into them acting out the exact same way of the system of oppression that they wanted to topple. That's just history. That's just history.
Do you remember when Ronald Reagan was the president and everybody hated Ronald Reagan, and all the cool people, all the punk rockers and all the comic book people hated, and they made great comic books? Now the pendulum swings the other way. You get the liberals in charge, and the mainstream comic books are crap. The popular music is crap. It's like, come on, where's the counterculture? Well, the counterculture is Comicsgate and crowdfunding and everything, and
Yeah, it's there. It's building up, and that's the thing that I think is so great to see, is because it's not. I know some people are more politically entrenched, thinking that it's just defined by politics. On both sides, I agree with and disagree with. That they think it's just political, and it has to do with that. And it's deeper than that. It's bigger than that. But we're seeing, because of it, a lot of different people from all sides, all political spectrums, all walks of life, it doesn't matter, whatever it is, coming together, because it is an anti-establishment. It is creating a counterculture. And that's the only way that we're going to have even a chance of survival, let alone actually winning and beating this thing, is to create, to fight the culture being established and being perpetuated with creating our own thing, getting it out there, getting it in front of people, and keeping it going.
Into the tunnel. I do think, like, I don't know, like, now I'm starting to see, like, even news articles of stuff that, like, I wouldn't see a couple of years ago. And I think, like, guys at work, I work in a union, and the guys have to vote a certain way, and even these guys are just like, man, there's nothing good on TV. These TV shows, I think the pendulum is going to swing the other way,
Oh, totally.
I hope so. But as far as Marvel,
it's going to take time, but it will.
Guys, that ship has sailed. I'm Alterna all the way, Allegiance Arts all the way. These are some of the best comics. I'm not even joking. When I see you announce the next pre-order for comic books for Alterna, I'm like a little kid. I'm going to get King Krypton. I'm going to find out what Fabrizio, that maniac, is doing with Horace H. Hoover. You published that comic, and I bet you don't even know where that maniac is going with that.
I don't, but that's what makes it exciting,
yes,
right?
So good. He was on my channel a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, who's the target audience for that comic? And he was like, well, I go, it's me. I'm the target audience. Just put that comic book in an envelope and mail it to me. It's everything I wanted.
Fabrizio is a mystery wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in an enigma.
You look at that guy, and he's just like, oh, that's my next door neighbor. He's waving at you, water.
Yeah, just like every other psychopath.
And inside of his brain is this freaking fungus and tentacles.
Love you, Fabrizio.
Yeah, he's the greatest. I love Fabrizio. And Brian Bow, you got I'm not even joking. You got the greatest slate of comics going out right now. Wolf and Batsy. How fun is that? How fun is that? That Gorilla Suit Maniac I'm not even joking. I was looking at that cover. I just had it right here on my email.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite issue he's done so far. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everybody's. And before that, 6 was my favorite, and before that, 5 was my favorite. Every issue is getting better. I look at that cover. Excuse me. You open it up. That splash page of that. That's like Will Eisner. That's like Wally Wood. This guy is, you know, and Tinseltown. When I read Tinseltown by David Lucarelli, did I say his name right?
Yep. David Lucarelli.
I was like, in a healthy industry, Tinseltown would be celebrated. That would be an award-winning comic. It's everything that all of these mainstream people profess to want. You know, a female protagonist. She was treated away because of her sex and gender, and you know, discriminated against. You overcame it. There's excitement.
And it's set in a time period where that was very true too. 1915.
And then the second series is set in Mexico with legit history. Why is this comic book not being like everywhere? Eisner Awards should be talking about this comic. You know, it's a shame. You can see the caffeine is finally kicking into my system now. But you know, and Unit 44, that what was it, issue 5 with the cult?
Yeah, I love that Wes changed up the series style and doing these case files issue to issue. I think he's hitting his wheelhouse, and that series is great. Yeah,
comedy is a hard sell for me. You know, I'm you know, movies, books, whatever, but that issue made me laugh. I thought it was brilliant. That was one of my favorite comics that come, you know. So Alterna, come on, everybody in this audience, I'm sure, is buying it. Tinseltown would be a hit Netflix. Yes, that 4-issue series would be an excellent movie, you know.
Yeah.
And then the second would be the sequel, you know.
Yeah.
Dave works in Hollywood. Come on, you know.
Yeah, I know, right? Even that's. To me, it's a screaming indictment of even the status in which it is. And look at that, John. We're going to be at an hour 45. Doesn't even feel like it.
I'm not working tomorrow.
We'll push it.
24 hours, everybody.
We'll push it for 2.
Everybody, 24 hours. Me and Pete. We'll be like with cigarettes in the morning.
We'll be like talking like this. It's like,
my
voice is going. But hey, man, comics, man.
Name from the 50s.
So to me, I'm seeing a lot of the strike talk with Hollywood and whatnot, and all I could think is, okay, you know, I know the nitty gritty of it is it's weird, like a lot of strikes in Hollywood always are, but the long and short of it is this: if you're in the studio system, it's gonna always have you under its thumb. Period. If you're someone and you're an artist and you're out there and you're like, you know, I don't want to do these remakes. I don't want to do this race swapping crap. I don't want to pander. I don't want to, you know, have the stories come second and every agenda come first. I want to make art. I want to make stories. I want to make stuff that matters to people, right? If you're one of those people, get the hell out of the studio system, because that is not what that system is about. You shouldn't be striking. If you should be leaving, period. And there's a bunch of them there that if they have any genuine bone in their body, right, leave the system.
You can make a good, legit movie.
Totally.
On your own, you know?
Yeah.
This isn't the 70s anymore.
And there's a bunch of indie filmmakers that do it every day. Every day. You don't need the big studios. And there's all these production companies that are run by people that are very wealthy due to the studio system. What a bigger F for you to leave the studio system, go, you know what, I'm taking all, that's like what Image did with Marvel, basically. You know, to leave and go, we're going independent, creating our own studios, making our own stuff, and we're optioning the independent IP that's out there through comics, books, etc., etc. We don't need the big corporate IPs to tell good stories.
Right.
That would send a whole message to the studio system that these guys, crap, maybe they're going to actually do it. You know, and if it's a case where they're using AI and against their likeness or, you know, whatever that is, against their consent without their permission, that's not a strike. That's a lawsuit. Right. You know, so what are you guys doing? And then you have unions and union reps. There should be, if there's going to be something done that's going to move it forward, that should take place in closed-door meetings that benefit both parties, because having it spill out into the streets and getting ugly is only causing them to turn on each other, which is what's been happening lately.
You know what? I was like, strike, you guys, destroy Hollywood, go up in flames. You know, you guys brought it on yourself, because you preach it to me. When your crap movies fail, you're telling me that it's my fault.
Been insufferable for 6 to 7 years, easy.
And then I hear about like guys that I know, and like my cousin's a grip. He's out of work. He's not in charge of the movies.
Yeah. And where are their residuals, right? Where are their residuals, the production crew?
I just built an airport. That airport is still in business, and I don't get any money. I just got money up front, and that
you don't get a cent for every flight,
right? So I just have to laugh. It's like, I don't care about your residuals, buddy. Like, how much did you make? I was arguing with a guy on Twitter, and I said, just honestly tell me how much you make every week when you're working on your TV show. And he wouldn't answer. I said, you're not answering because you make more than me. And I'm in the mud and the rain and the cold. I'm pooping in a porta sand.
Yeah, they're not just getting back end pay, right. Right. And they're not taking the risk of being producers on it and getting the budgets done and the budgets made and overseeing and making sure people are getting paid. They're getting paid. They're having a job. Now, if they're not getting paid what they're supposed to get paid, that's different. If they're getting things that are being done without their consent, that's different. But those aren't terms for strike. Now, if you're talking about there's a stalemate, then it's easy. It's said and done. Well, we live in a time period where these people could just take it even to crowdfunders. Imagine like Steven Spielberg, right? All of a sudden he's like, I want to crowdfund Goonies 2, and I want it to be like the greatest sequel ever made, exactly the way I want to do it, cast everybody back, get it done right. You think that thing is going to be difficult to fund?
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
Like, I tell the writers, I'm like, you're not likable. Why am I cheering for you guys? You hate us blue collar people. You call us flyover country. And this guy that I was arguing with on Twitter, finally, he was just like, he goes, well, we call it flyover country because there's nothing there. You have no culture. I said, there you go. Now you know why I don't support you guys. You actively hate us, But I don't know. And
Absolutely.
Then I know guys that do storyboards and they're out of work, So
and I absolutely feel for those guys.
That I feel bad for, but I don't feel bad for the studios, and I don't feel bad for these Michael Rappaports dancing around because the guy he doesn't like.
Plenty of knuckleheads on both sides of it. Yeah. And the production crew and the people who are out there also making it possible and getting dirty, getting down and deep with it, putting in the long hours too to make the thing possible.
Kids and he's worried about his mortgage payments right now.
Yeah,
he's a freelance.
Exactly. And if anything, if you were to go out there and be like, fine, we're going to do a show because these people need to get paid because they're suffering too, all of a sudden, get the whole weight of the world on you from the industry. They don't turn and keep their energy lit and keep those fires going against the studio that they allegedly have a problem with. They will immediately turn on the people that they allegedly are there to fight for, going, oh, these people are suffering, they're not getting paid enough, and whatever else it is. Okay, well, you know what will help that is if people can work and negotiate while working. So it's a very weird situation, man. A weird situation.
I hope that Hollywood changes. I do think that we're in like a weird, what's the word? Larva, pupa, whatever, chrysalis. That's the word I was looking for. I think the world is in this chrysalis right now, and it could be pretty scary what emerges. It could be pretty cool what emerges. I'm not smart enough to predict, but things are really, really changing, and they're changing fast, and the change is kind of scary. So.
Yeah, and hopefully, we get through it the other side and we have a nice soft landing, but it seems like some people want to really crash and burn.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's I think if we do make it through, and I think we will, it'll take time, it'll take work. It's not going to be easy. But I think it's going to be because people were supporting independent creativity. They were supporting the ideals presented therein and trying to get away from what's been pushed by the corporate establishment. Well, so if we see that and we continue to see it grow, which is great to see, I think we're going to see something fantastic. And as long as we strive not to make the same mistakes that they've made, I think we're going to see a very big and healthy paradigm shift in the right direction.
Yeah, I hope so too. I just have to laugh at this hatred of Comicsgate. What do they want to do? Be nice to their customers and sell product that people actually want, and that generates hate. Can you imagine if I opened up a deli that was mean and didn't give you the sandwich that you wanted? What kind of business model is that?
Well, it's a nice distraction, right? It's a nice distraction to point at the shortcomings of the up-and-comer, as opposed to addressing the abuse and shortcomings and mistreatment of the established corporation.
I don't know. I just have to
yeah.
laugh. I think it's a lot of lazy people who just got used to working for the big two, all of a sudden realizing if these independent comics boom, they're out of work. you know, what is Dan Slott going to do if Marvel fires him tomorrow? What comic is he going to sell? You know, I'm not going to go. I won't even know about his crowdfunding because I'm blocked. So what, so thanks a lot, Dan.
That's true. I'm blocked too. I've been blocked for a while. I'm kind of happy about it.
I was, to be honest, I was a little sad because I did have good memories of shaking the guy's hand. I met him at a Big Apple Con before New York Comic Con. I don't know if you remember that. It was a disgusting little convention that my wife turned to me and said, if you ever take me to this comic convention again, we're getting a divorce. That's how disgusting this convention was.
What year was this?
Big Apple Con. It was in the Penn Hotel.
Oh, yeah. It's not in the Radisson?
Maybe it's in the Radisson. I don't remember exactly where, but it was really...
Oh, no, you're right. It is in the Penn. You're right.
And it was just like it was like I felt like I was in like 1970s with guys with cigars. Like, yeah, I want to buy this comic. And Pete and Dan was sitting there. He invited me to sit down. We talked about She-Hulk. We talked about Thing. We were like shaking hands. We were high-fiving. And then five years later, I'm blocked. So yeah, it did bother me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm an emotional guy. I wear my emotions on my sleeve.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
And then I went to Kurt Busiek to literally thank him for Astro Cities, one of my favorite comic books of all time. I'm blocked.
Yeah.
I was talking about my website before, my Villains Vigilant. He was I had 35 members on this website. He was one of them, and we were talking about comic books. This was 2001, and here it is, 2023. I'm trying to thank the guy for making a comic book that means a lot to me, that I actually look. And I know that me and him have different politics. I'm an adult. I can get past that. And he doesn't want to talk to me. I'm blocked. Big Apple rocks, man. Come on. Man, I am just ticking off.
You're the most controversial person in comics, John.
Yeah. Yeah. Astro City. Justin says Astro City and Autumn Lands. Kurt Busiek, he wrote a great Avengers run. I wanted to thank this guy. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Mark Waid, I knew I was blocked before I even looked up his name. But how are you gonna sell? This is what you do. Eric Larson. I'm the only person on the planet that has every issue of Savage Dragon, probably besides Eric, and I'm blocked by this lunatic. How is this selling comics? How is John is making me feel unsafe. Yeah, call HR. Call HR. I'm going up to the office.
Oh my Lord, man! Oh man, John, this was a really fun show, man. It was a cathartic show, I think.
And we still didn't get into Dean Martin yet. This is the second time.
No, we didn't get into Dino. We'll get into Dino the next time.
Yeah, promise. I'm leading off with celebrity roasts next time.
All right. But I guess let's close with Dino then.
Okay.
Celebrity roast. But which one was your favorite?
Which guest?
Yeah.
Don Rickles.
Rickles was great. Yeah. Yeah. That's an easy pick.
Yeah.
Man. I loved Mr. T. That one was great. That was unexpectedly great.
Oh, you're talking about the celebrity, the person who got roasted.
The person who got roasted. Yeah.
I gotta say, the Angie Dickinson one.
That was great too.
Oh man, did that one make me laugh?
That one was great.
There's a joke on that one that I don't know if I can repeat. I used my one F-bomb, so I'll keep it to myself. But the Angie Dickinson one, there was so many good ones, and I gotta say, like my wife would she would perk up when Ruth Buzzy came on and started smacking everybody.
Oh yeah. Oh man, it's just I love them. I love the roasts. I love the Dean Martin variety show.
Yep.
And then I think out of all I got a bunch of records, but I definitely have. I think I got like 30 Dean Martin records.
Oh, what a great voice!
Oh my Lord, everything. I love them.
And Tony Bennett were my two favorite voices.
Yeah, I love the Dean's country albums and things like that. Good grief, man. He did a lot of great Hank Williams covers and things like that. All just wonderful.
I'll get your audience mad at me again. I was never a big fan of Frank Sinatra's voice. I love the man. I love the mystique behind him, but I always found his voice was just like, my uncle sounds like that.
You ever and I get where you're coming from, because there's a lot of Sinatra that I really couldn't get into, but you ever hear a lot of his swing stuff?
His earlier stuff was good.
With Count Basie and things like that. Oh man, that's great. That's some great stuff. Oh man, the energy in those songs is fantastic.
Are you into new music at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, not like How New You Want to Go.
I bought a record for the first time in a couple years, and I looked. It came out in 2012, so I'm like,
okay. Depending who it is, there's some people that are running around. I mean, I love all kinds of stuff. I love AC/DC, Iron Maiden, the Aquabats, Nirvana.
Aquabats. Oh my God, you're the only other person on the planet besides me that I one of their albums.
I love Aquabats. I did a real early interview. It was like 2018 with the Bat Commander.
Really?
Yeah.
When
so
I was
if you want to go find that,
we were making up our own superheroes, and I made up the Aquabat. The kids didn't know, and they thought I made up the Aquabats. And then I showed them a record, and I was like, "You see, I made up a character." And the kids were like, "Oh my God, Mr. Bullet made up the Aquabats. And now there's a record." Kids are easy to trick. They're dumb.
They had a great show too. Talk about a band that really, man, they should have a comic book. They should have a toy line. They are so underappreciated.
Yeah, they're fun. They were a fun band. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a fun interview with Bat Commander.
I gotta look. Is it? I can still find it.
Yeah. It's on my it's on this YouTube channel.
Cool. I gotta
man, it's like a whole different world though. It was like 5 years ago, 2018 or so.
Yeah, it was. That
was
a different world.
Just everything about that interview. It's just looking at it. I'm like, God, that looks like it was 20 years ago. And I'm like, well, I guess it makes sense. I feel like I've been through 20 years worth of crap since that point in time. Yeah. But it was.
I didn't have a beard
fun.
In 2018.
Whole other world. But yeah, man.
They're comic book fans, right? Aquabats.
Oh yeah, holy smokes. Yeah, it was great too, because he was showing me some prototypes, because they were gonna do a toy line, and he had like the battle tram and things like that, and I was showing some prototypes for the toys that they were gonna do, but like it never launched off the ground with that. But yeah, they were awesome. But yeah, I like all kinds of music, but I gravitate more nowadays, I guess, towards a lot of the older stuff. But even then, it's like, sometimes I gotta put on. I used to be a pretty big Beatles fan, but I don't necessarily hate them or anything nowadays. I just don't really listen to them as much anymore.
I don't know what they're like. It's like a hamburger. My hamburger is my comfort food. The Beatles are my if I'm just having a bad day, I just enjoy listening to the Beatles, Yeah, and I'm going through a Led Zeppelin phase. I don't know what's going on.
Zeppelin, man. Yeah.
I need the heavy drums just to get me through the day sometimes.
Yeah, get the Levee's Gonna Break,
Oh my God, is that the greatest? That is. I play that drums for my nieces and nephews. That I play that, and they're just like, I'm like, how can you not know this? How can you not know these bands? And I realize now that Led Zeppelin to my nieces and nephews is like, I don't know, like Frank Sinatra to me growing up.
Sort of, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Now and Then by the Beatles is Rolling Stones. What's funny? My two older brothers were into the Rolling Stones, so the Beatles were mine, and the Rolling Stones. So I didn't listen to them because I wanted to be my own thing, but I got to say, with like the past 10 years, I've been listening to so much Stones, and I really, really like stuff you don't hear. How many times can you hear Sympathy for the Devil, or Satisfaction?
Oh yeah. Those kinds of bands, all of them. And that's why I love getting the records and you just put them on and let it play, right? As opposed to like running around and you just play the song and you give it like 10 seconds and you're like, it doesn't sound that good. I'll skip it. But you have the record, you just leave it and let it go. It's the greatest. Oh, ELO is huge for me too. I love ELO.
That's another band that I didn't realize how good they were.
Oh my Lord. Yeah.
ELO is a good band. But what you just said about an album, like I got my turntable up there. I just said on my wife, I got all my records out of storage. I got all my comics out of storage. I just need a turntable. And one of my buddies puts on Facebook, I'm getting rid of a turntable speakers. I was like, I'll be at your house tomorrow. It was like divine providence. So I'm listening to records that I haven't listened to since I put my stuff in storage when I went to college. And putting on a record is a different listening experience.
It's a religious experience, man. It's so great.
It's a commitment. You sit there and you're listening to the album, you know, and then you get up and you got to flip the album over. Like,
yeah. It's like newsprint, though. The sound, there's a warmth to it. The way there's a warmth to newsprint with comics, there's a warmth to the sound of the record.
Albums are the newsprint of the music world.
Yeah.
Vinyl is the newsprint of the music world.
I love it. It's you know, when I was growing up and I'm like listening, I grew up with records and cassettes and whatnot, obviously, but then it was just like, you know, CDs. It's portable. There's a CD player in the car. It's like CD, right? So we always had records, and I always loved putting them on. But now I'm getting back big time into records again, and just scooping up, going to like Goodwills even, and picking up records. That's oh man.
I bought so many CDs of albums I already had, because if you're into music, you got to get the CDs. It sounds better. And then I gave away albums. I'm still furious. I gave away my Nevermind the Bollocks. You know, a lot of Beatles. Here's a funny story. I guess we'll close out on this. My high school girlfriend gave me a call, and she's like, I just called an electrician to put in a light over my garage, and he's charging me $650. I was like, I'll be there Saturday. That guy's a crook. He shouldn't be an electrician. They give us a bad name. So I drive down there. She neglected to tell me that there is no light in the garage. You got to run a wire through her garage. You got to crawl through the attic. You got to go down. You got to land it in the panel. And then, you know, so I said, $650 is a deal. I'm not doing this, you know? So turned out she lives next door to one of my buddies. So he came over and he started doing it. This guy loves doing work like this. So I'm like, I'm leaving. I don't want to do this. I'm too old to crawl through her attic. So he's doing it. And she's like, well, John, can I pay you anything? I was like, don't pay me anything. She goes, well, do you want my records? I was like, well, records? She has a milk crate. She goes, I don't listen to them anymore, and I know how much you like music. You know, we went out for like 3 years, from 17 to 20. And she gives me a milk crate full of records, and I'm looking through the records. These are my records. These are my missing records. I'm like, thanks a lot. I'm taking all my Clash records that had disappeared, my replacements.
Oh man, whoa!
These are my records. Thanks a lot. I finally got my records back. I just figured they disappeared.
That's awesome, man. Oh man, wow, what a story! It came full circle for you with that. Holy smokes! Wow. All right, man. Oh man. Okay, we got to wrap it up. We just passed the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, I know.
I thought wrong. I thought we could go an hour. I thought really, really wrong.
I talk too much.
Man, oh man. Everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. Everybody. It was fantastic. This whole we covered so much with this conversation. It was wonderful. And John, thank you so much, man. It was a blast having you on. I knew it would be fun. It was more funner than I thought it could have been.
Oh, good. Thank you.
The funnerest conversation I've had in a while, man. Good stuff.
You know, I do them on Wednesdays at 7:00 because of work, and I keep it short because I got to go to bed. But on weekends, I'll talk all night long. I love it. Pete, please come down again. I enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it again very, very soon.
I trumpet alternate comics. You know, every chance I I believe
that Horn of Gondor going for Alterna.
Yeah. You know, you got the best slate of comics going right now, and you guys are the best group of guys I've ever. You know,
Thank
I've had
you, man.
Every one of you guys. I got Wes coming on soon. He's the only guy I haven't spoke to. Robert Geronimo. I love talking to him. I scare him because I say I don't live too far from you, Robert.
That's why I moved. I got as far away from you as I could.
I finally moved into Suffolk, and then you got out of Suffolk.
Well, I was in Nassau. I was close to Suffolk. I was in Nassau.
I'm thinking you were in Smithtown.
That was a while ago, though.
You were in Nassau. You were too close to me. I'd be showing up at your house with some board games. Come on, Pete.
Man, oh man. All right, thank you so much, John. Everybody, go subscribe to John's Longbox. The link is in the description of the show. If you're not subscribed already, of course. Give the show a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribed. Also, make sure you're still subscribed. Sometimes we get people that YouTube is just like, we're going to kick you off for a little bit. Ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. I'll be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern. My guest tomorrow night will be Razor Fist. Razor Fist will be on the show. Yeah, so we'll be talking about Western comics, horror in Western comics, and the horrors of Western comics. So we'll be having a fun conversation as well tomorrow night. But everybody have a wonderful evening and an even better tomorrow. Everybody, see you then. John, thank you so much, and we'll catch up real soon to get something going on your channel, my friend.